what's up? Thanks so much for tuning in today. We're really excited to have you here today for how to get the best audio for your live stream. My name is Josh Clements. I'm a community manager here at BoxCast, and I'm also a videographer.
And my name is Gary Buchanan. I'm at the Client Success and Technical Support team, and I'm an audio guru, and I have my own podcast.
He does.
The Holy Mess Podcast on Apple Podcasts and where all podcast flavors are found. So
nice. What do you guys talk about in that podcast?
Well, our podcast is basically centered around the Holy Mess. So I'm a Christian, and all of the people that we converse with and our hosts are all Christians, and we just have a very messy life, like from children to soccer games and all of the above. Houses never being clean. So that's where we got the concept, the Holy Mess.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I believe a lot of the equipment that we're showing here today you use in that podcast.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. Everything from some of the cabling to definitely the console. I use in my podcast along with my friends. So.
Well, I'm super excited to learn from you here today. This topic is really big for me because I know a lot about video, but audio isn't necessarily my specialty. And I know audio is a good specialty of yours. And so while you guys are kind of learning some of these concepts today, I'm actually going to be learning them too. So I'll be asking him questions, and we're going to try to demystify some of the things that come with live audio mixing.
Yeah.
But before we get started with the presentation, I'd like to go over a couple housekeeping things. One, you can actually click on the link in the description to download the presentation in case you want to go along with us as we talk about these topics, or you missed something in a slide, or you want to share it with somebody. So that's a downloadable PDF. And then secondly, if you want to know about a lot of the gear we like to use, you can go to kit.com/boxcast, which is also in the description. You can click on that link and see some of the stuff we actually use ourselves for live video streaming.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is you'll see next to the video player, we do have a chat feature, and we have some live moderators here to answer some of your questions. If it's something about BoxCast streaming platform or our services or with your specific live stream, but if it's something more technical and in-depth about your audio and your setup in itself, we're actually going to be doing a live Q&A at the end of this session.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
And we'll be able to answer some of those questions there. On top of that, if you don't get your question answered today, or if you have more in-depth questions that you really need answered from us, you can feel free to reach out to us here. These are our email addresses. We are real people, and we're happy to talk to you because we love helping people with this stuff.
Absolutely.
I know me personally, I've been there in the beginning before, and I'm sure you have, and it can be very confusing.
It can be. It can be.
So that being said, our goal here today is to teach you the basics of live audio production and how to improve the audio quality of your live streams. And I know that this is something you're really passionate about and something that you love helping people with.
Yeah, I love it. In fact, I would say about 30 or 40% of my tickets and calls that we get in are about some audio issues. And so it's really cool to just kind of dive into the problem and fix it.
Yeah. So great. So here's a quick agenda of what we'll be talking about. We've gotten a little bit through the intro here. We'll start with outputs and connection types. Then we'll go through some of the confusing things that you might see on your audio mixer, like gain and EQ. Then we'll compare digital and analog mixers and the advantages and disadvantages of both of those. Then we'll talk about Gary's method of creating the right mix for your live stream and the way Gary goes about doing it, which I'm very fascinated about because I need help desperately with. And then we'll talk about best workflows for our encoders. And if you are a BoxCast customer, you'll find this really useful because we'll talk about the best way to get a audio signal into your BoxCaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's hop right into it. And I know when we were talking about this topic and doing this webinar, before we got into the nitty-gritty of it, you said, if there's anything you need to know, like it's this formula that we have right here. It's the most important things when you're talking about your audio setup and getting the right sound, you need to know are your equipment and your connection type. Can you go into that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I told you that equipment and connection type are the two most important things when it comes to selecting the right piece of equipment with the right connections is because that can make or break some of your live stream or podcast or whatever you're doing, right?
Okay.
So having the right equipment, whether they be the right type of console, whether analog or digital, having the right type of converters and cables that go with it, as well as then the type of connections you're going to make with it. So whether it's XLR or RCA, those can literally make or break your live stream and or your recordings. So the reason I say that even more in depth, just real quick, is because if you don't have the right equipment, you're going to have to jerry-rig something. And then
you're only as good as your tools, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, exactly. So is it fair to say then if you are having If you are experiencing some issues with the audio from your live stream, there's probably an issue with one or both of these, right?
Can be, yeah, absolutely. A setting, or maybe a connection type, or cable's broken, or maybe you're using the wrong type of adapter versus, stereo and mono, something in that nature.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that right there is a formula for success. So I think what we're going to do next is we're going to go over the audio mixer, and we're going to go over all the knobs and weird inputs and outputs you see on it. But let's start with outputs.
Yeah.
Let's start with those, and maybe you can explain to us the two main types of outputs on an audio mixer.
Let me break it down a little bit here for you. So with a mixer, and this is true for all mixers, all consoles have these same basics.
Okay.
And so mains out and auxiliary outs. And so what we'll see here in just a second when Wade flips up to our overhead camera is I'm going to show you some of these connections here. So this is my X18. This is my digital console made by Behringer. It's outside of my child. It's probably my third or second greatest love. But here what you're going to see is that there are some major connection types that fit in, and right here are my mains.
Okay.
These are XLR outs, and what they do is they basically are going to send these out to speakers, and that's what mains do. Mains usually go out to your main speakers. That's where
For people in the audience.
people who are not on the live stream, people
Okay.
who are physically at your location, are going to be able to hear your audio through those main speakers.
Got it.
The other type is then what they call aux sends or aux outs, or even sometimes they're just auxiliary outputs. And that is on here, go to the side angle there, Wade, right here, mine are 1/4 inch, but a lot of consoles, sometimes they have them as XLRs, especially bigger consoles.
Okay.
And what these do is this routes audio from your console, wherever the source is coming into, and routes it to other destinations. So that would be like a floor wedge, or maybe that's like your nursery. You got a nice speaker system set up there so the workers can hear. Or maybe you're taking it out to an audio recording.
Okay.
And that's where it's big for us here in the live stream realm, is that you can send that out to your BoxCaster. You can send that out to your encoder. And that's usually what outputs do.
And so would you say for live streaming specifically, like the reason you want to use an aux output is because you can adjust the level for the stream separately from what's going on in the presentation area, right?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
you'll get the ability to create a better mix for the live stream. And
Yeah.
audio live sounds different than audio recorded or audio streamed.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a good point. And there's also the reality that different devices play differently with each other.
Yes.
And so sometimes, like, if you're going into a BoxCaster or a video switcher or a camera, you might have to raise the level for it to be a little louder.
Changing
than
how
what
it's
you
coming
need
in
it
and
to
out.
be.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So that's really what those two main components do, is literally they route audio out to other locations.
Got it. So with live streaming specifically, the takeaway is definitely come out of an aux output, unless you were to have a separate mixer just for your live stream. for whatever
Right.
reason.
Or in case you're not running as many input channels, such as like mics and band stuff, maybe you go something like a smaller console, like this little one here, where you only have one type of out connection and it's control. So yes, obviously you want to do something that's going to route the audio to the BoxCaster. And my suggestion, as well as many other people's, is you use it with control. So you want to control the levels. You want to control how it sounds and who's in it and what's not.
Got it. Got it. Well, that's really useful. I mean, I know for the longest time I would just be like, oh, main output, that's the most important thing. But that's not necessarily the case.
Correct, yeah.
You can route it a bunch of different ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got outputs on the mixer. The other thing we're going to show you is all the different type of audio connections you're going to run into, the different types of cables you'll see. So we'll show you all of those, but before we do that, I know you have a couple of rules that you talk about when choosing the right audio connection, the right cable.
Yeah, so my first 3 rules with any type of running audio or any kind of audio equipment and sound goes in this order. How is my audio from my mixer being sent? So basically, where's my audio coming from into the mixer and where's it going?
Okay.
And then we can talk those types of connections here in just a moment. Second is, what is the distance from my mixer to my input for my live stream? So how far is what I'm using to live stream away from my mixer? Some people have it just a few feet. Other people have it literally 50 feet or more. So depending on where you're coming from or where you're going, it'll help. And then, of course, the last is, what am I sending my audio to? So if you're going to send it to like a computer or even our BoxCaster or maybe even another encoder, like a Helio, then you're changing the type of connection that it'll go there.
Yeah.
And so with that comes some common connecting types, ones that most people will see, most people will recognize, but not necessarily understand what they do.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so the most common ones that I know of and that most people know of will run from XLR, RCA, quarter-inch TRS, headphone connection. Those are the main types of connections.
So a good rule of thumb is before you were to buy any audio equipment, just consider what devices you have to connect it to, right?
Exactly. So that's again where it comes with equipment and connection. You got to make sure you have the right equipment and the right connection to get it to where you're going to send it.
Cool.
Absolutely.
That's a really good rule to follow, because I don't think I did that when I started, and then I was like, oh dang it, like I need a different cable. Now I have to buy a converter, an adapter, and you can convert and adapt everything, but it's better to just know ahead of time.
Yeah, when you add adapters and converters, there's always the likelihood that one of those are going to fail, or that they're failing already, but then you have much more difficulty in trying to anticipate and fix or troubleshoot when you have a problem. So
makes sense.
More connections equals more problems.
Yeah. More money, more problems.
More money, more problems.
More
right?
connections, more problems. Got it. Okay, so we have a little bag of tricks here. We're just going to pull out, and we're going to show you, in case you're really new to this stuff, we're going to show you what some things you'll run into. So here, if we cut to the side angle here, we have what's called an RCA connection, which you've probably seen this if you played older video game consoles and stuff like that. You know,
yeah, your original PS1s, PS2s, right?
Exactly. I was a Dreamcast guy.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh, good times. So this is an RCA connection. You can see the red and the white, and one is left and right, right?
Yeah, usually the way that I've always remembered it is that white is left and red is right. And I know
red,
it's hard.
right.
Yeah,
red,
you want to say
okay.
left is right and red is white, and you're like, no, that's not it at all.
Don't
so
go that
don't
way.
go confused. Yeah.
Okay, and where can you most commonly run into these type of connections?
So a lot of times, commonly, those are going to come into like consoles that have built-in RCA left and rights, white and reds, right? They'll go, a lot of times you'll see those in the back of some home theater systems where you're running analog audio between different devices, maybe a graphic EQ or switcher of some sort. I know our BoxCaster actually has that built into it, so you can get audio from your console directly into your BoxCaster as an analog audio source.
Right.
And then, of course, you can run those in parallel to to televisions and other devices.
Got it. All right, cool. Well, show us XLR.
Yeah, so XLR is this type of connection right here. We run this for a lot. This is one of the most common connection types when it comes to audio reinforcement. And that's because a lot of your boards and a lot of your devices require some sort of balanced connection. And so that's what this is. And of course, they come in many different flavors, but this one is a male to a female end. And of course, as you see here on the board, I have combo jacks on my board. My outputs are XLR. That's a very common type of audio connection.
And in video production, the majority of stuff that I interact with, I've always noticed is XLR. Is there a reason for that? Does it run longer than like the RCA?
You can run it at a good distance. It's more the sense that you can run it in dual, so you'll have stereo and mono availability. So if you wanted to run 2 XLR channels, you could do that, and you'll get your stereo connection. And really, it's the way the signal is being sent.
Okay,
so.
Got it. That makes sense. And then next XLR we have quarter-inch.
Quarter-inch, yeah.
Maybe you can explain like the anatomy, because I remember you were explaining this to me, and it was mind-blowing to know actually what the tip of the quarter-inch means.
Yeah, so quarter-inch basically means that it's a quarter-inch, so it's a quarter-inch diameter. That's all that means. And then with the quarter-inch connection, and here's where that tip's coming in that you were saying about, the way you can tell that a quarter-inch cable is mono or stereo is by the black rings. So these black rings, some of them are white, but usually they're black.
Yeah, maybe move it over.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. So what you're going to see here is that this one has 1 black ring. That means it's mono, so it's single. All right,
okay.
Single channel. If it has 2, then it's stereo, and that means it's dual. So you're going to get both left and right through that cable. And then sometimes, like when iPhones and things started coming out, you see they have 3. And that's a TRRS, right?
Yeah.
And that TRRS just basically means it has a mic input, so it'll detect a microphone.
Okay.
But that's another one of those common types of cables that are available with audio reinforcement.
Okay, good to know. And then, of course, last but not least, we have the good old trusty 1/8" connection.
Yeah.
Which you'll find with, prosumer level cameras and other types of devices. We can show it up here, but you've probably seen it. This is pretty much what's called a headphone cable.
Headphone jack, headphone cable,
headphone jack. And where you might need to adapt or run into this is if you have to, connect to a more consumer level device, like a phone, for example, right?
Right, or if you're trying to connect into something that has a quarter-inch cable requirement, you can run an adapter from 1/8" to the quarter-inch. A lot of times what you'll see is there are a lot of cables that run RCA to 1/8 inch. That's so you can take it from a board to an input device of some sort,
Okay.
like a recorder, or maybe you're running into your phone or running from your phone to your console. So yeah. And a lot of times those devices are common. The 1/8 inches are more common on consumer devices because that's the main method we listen to stuff, right? Outside of Bluetooth, 1/8 inch connection is how you put your headphone jack in. So
and it's been around for a while.
It's been around for a long while. Yeah, absolutely.
You brought up another interesting point, is that you always need to convert or adapt something. So I just want to show this cable, and this is an example of like an XLR to 1/4 inch adapter, right?
Yeah, that would be a female XLR to 1/4 inch adapter.
So if you ever need, and they're not usually very expensive, but if you ever need to convert your signal, it's pretty easy and fairly inexpensive.
Yeah,
right?
they make little what they call tube cigars adapters that fit on the ends of these that can convert this to a male adapter.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so literally hundreds and hundreds of different types of adapters and connections that are available to make your audio needs more better.
Yeah. All right, so we've gotten the outputs on the mixer, and we've gotten the connection types to get audio to your mixer and out of your mixer. Now let's talk about some of the different ways we can adjust sound on the mixer. And then I guess we'll start with gain.
Gain.
Maybe you can
big
explain why gain is so important.
Well, it's not the laundry detergent that we're talking about, just so everybody's aware. But gain, technically speaking, is the increase in the power of a signal, okay? But realistically, let's break it down so anybody can understand it, right? Realistically, gain is really the power or the increase in the source's ability to produce a sound. All right? So if you have something that has low gain, it's going to have low input volume. If you have something that has high gain, you're going to have high input volume. And generally, any source that has some sort of sufficient gain inside of the mixer going out will give the rest of the console to apply it to the rest of the console, so that way the console can work properly and do what you want it to do.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, when I was getting started with audio and I started adjusting the gain knobs, I thought, oh, I'm changing the volume. Why is gain and volume different?
Well, because gain is not volume.
Okay, that's a good answer.
That's a primary thing to tell you, right? Gain is not volume. So imagine with me, you have a microphone, okay? A microphone, when you put gain in the microphone, you're increasing the sensitivity of the mic. You're opening the mic or closing the mic. So low gain, close, high gain, open. And so it's not volume. It's the ability for that to send a signal and how much of that signal is being received.
Okay.
All right.
So it's the power of the signal.
Right. It sounds like
juice,
volume.
maybe.
Yeah, it's the juice,
The
right?
juice, okay.
It sounds like volume, but it really isn't.
Okay.
It's just the ability to open the mic up or close it.
I see. Okay. Well, that makes sense. That's very helpful. And then I know you were talking to me about gain structure.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And this one I'm still wrapping my head around. It sounds very technical. Could you explain it a little more?
It is technical in a term, but it can be really simply to understand. Every device that we connect to a soundboard or to each other has their own amount of volume or gain into it, right?
Okay.
So if you have a phone connected to your console, if you don't turn your phone all the way up, your console doesn't get the audio, right? Or if you don't have like a guitar and you don't turn it all the way up, it doesn't get to the console. That doesn't hear anything. So gain structure is important because it allows other devices and destinations to get enough or to receive the signal.
I see.
So if you don't have a good gain structure starting off at the beginning, you're going to have low gain across the board and even no gain. And one of the things that I told you, I think we were discussing when we were starting to talk about this topic, was that imagine you have a hose and you start adding Y connections to the hose and you start splitting those connections off to other hoses. If you don't have enough water pressure coming from that to the hose, into the hose, everything's going to be really low. So the more water pressure you get, the more volume you're going to get coming in connection.
So from your source, you need to start with the right amount of gain, the right amount of power, so that everybody else can share.
So you end with the right amount of power.
Okay,
right? Exactly.
That's very good. And then in the same way, I know you were explaining to me about clipping and distortion. So too much gain, like at the start, can create clipping and distortion.
Yeah.
If your microphone is distorted from the source, so if I yell into a microphone and I don't have enough like room left there, then it's going to clip and distort everything else, and there's no way of fixing that, right?
Not initially, not when you start, but initially once you build a gain structure and learn how the gain works from device to console, from console to wherever, if you're increasing or adding more availability for gain, then you can correct it pretty easily. And that, again, that's why gain structure is important, because if you put too much in and you add more to it, you're going to have a big issue. It's going to clip and distort.
Okay.
Likewise, you don't put enough in, you're not going to get enough to go out, and you're not going to hear it.
Okay.
So it's very important. And a lot of times you see a gain structure happen is that applies to large runs of different places. So a guitar has its own volume control or own gain control. And that goes to the board, which has its own volume control and gain control. Okay. And then that runs out to, like some sort of audio converter, which has its own gain control. Like video switchers sometimes have their own gain controls.
Yeah.
And so that's gain structuring. You have to build enough at the source to get it to where it's going to go and make sure that you have enough going to it.
Okay.
But you don't overdo it in one area.
Okay.
And that's where this last point on that topic on that slide for gain structure comes in, is a lot of boards are equipped with a button called a pre-fader level. Pre-fader means that it's before the volume knob or volume fader.
So that's the PFL button that has the light on it?
Yeah, it's the PFL. It's that pretty little green light usually.
Yeah, I've probably had that pushed in one too many times without realizing
Right,
it.
And then you see like the meter bar jumps up and down when somebody's talking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what that does. So it's measuring the amount of gain coming into the board before you start pushing volume up to go out to the mains.
So it's like a non-affected, like when the PFL is like a non-affected signal. It hasn't been mixed yet.
Right, exactly. It's not being mixed. It's what that individual channel is receiving as a gain.
Okay, well, Wade, make a note of that. That's something we need to definitely consider in the future.
Right.
So I know another term with gain is headroom, and when we're in video and we talk about headroom, it's about like the amount of room from the top of my head to the top of the frame. There's that term in audio. Is that a similar concept, or
sort
what
of?
Does that mean?
Yeah, sort of is. So headroom is literally, it's a buffer between the source of audio and how high the system can go without clipping or distorting.
Okay.
And then also in reverse, it goes as how low, so where it becomes too inaudible or not audible enough. Mm-hmm. But it's important because if you over-adjust gain and you over-adjust it in the beginning or even in the middle, you're going to see that there's an overabundance of that signal level, and it will create that clip, which it'll sound like somebody's being cut off in the middle.
So common scenario that I've seen with this is for sports live streaming. You've got an awesome sports live stream, cool camera angles, etc., and something happens where the announcer gets really excited about an awesome play, like a touchdown, for example, and then he screams into the microphone.
And you hear that audible cut with a little distortion or mulatto distortion. Okay. That is clipping. It's literally cutting off the signal because it can't go any higher.
So that means he didn't have enough headroom going in his mic, and then when he decided to yell into it,
there was not enough for it to accommodate that signal increase, and then you get that terrible sound.
So there you go.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's headroom. So you got to explain the 6-foot man analogy to us.
6-foot man. Yeah.
This was so helpful. I'm a visual person, so this changed the way I think about it.
Yeah, so I made this up a while back when I was teaching some of my volunteers how to adjust gain structure so that they had enough headroom. And so as you see here in the graphics, you have normal headroom, and you have our 6-foot man, and he's inside of an 8-foot room. So if you have a 6-foot man inside an 8-foot room, how much is left above his head?
2 feet to the ceiling.
We're glad you can do math.
Yes, okay, got that.
Good job. That's why you are the man here, Josh.
That's right.
So gain structure works in the same way. If that man was going to grow any in the 8-foot room, he has the ability to do so because he has enough of a buffer to accommodate that growth.
Okay.
So flip that into audio. It's the same concept. If you have a signal that's coming in extremely low, you can't hear it. If it's coming in extremely high, it's usually going to not have enough headroom. Mm-hmm. So if there's any more introduction of space, you don't have enough headroom to accommodate the signal. So that would be like putting an 8-foot man in a 6-foot room.
You just cut his head off.
You just cut his head off, right? So you have to accommodate, you have to adjust your gain levels so that way you have enough room that if the pastor or the guest speaker or the band goes and has an increase in volume all of a sudden or an increase in the signal, it's going to be able to be accommodated and you won't get that terrible distortion.
And similarly, if Ant-Man walks into a room, you can't even see him. And I guess, okay, so if you don't have enough volume from the source, you have too much headroom, then there's no other way to raise that level.
To hear it, right.
Like later on, right?
Exactly. So it's like putting a 6-inch man in an 8-foot room.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to see that man very well, right? So it's the same concept with audio. You're not going to be able to hear it very well.
Yeah.
And there's a term called the noise floor, And that is literally the level in which noise is inaudible.
I see.
So sound is
Okay.
inaudible. But typically what you hear in that range is you hear a small hiss.
Oh,
Okay? So when you adjust and account for gain structure, you don't want to put too little into it. That way you hear a hiss and nothing else.
Yeah.
Because usually what ends up happening is when you put enough signal in, that hiss fades out. It doesn't
Yeah.
even become part of the audio anymore.
Yeah. And I have noticed where in situations where if I have too much headroom, even if I plug into a mixer and try to raise the levels, I can hear some volume, but just a lot of hiss.
Right.
And so that's when you have too much, right?
That's when you have too much headroom and you don't have enough gain. Your gain structure is all out of whack and you don't have enough put into it.
Got it.
Exactly.
Well, that makes sense. So that's gain for you. Then if you're new to audio mixing and you see an audio mixer like I did, there's something under the gain knob, which are these confusing little buttons that adjust things that say EQ on them. Can we talk about EQ for a little bit?
Right. So EQ is just a really big fancy word for tone control, much like caviar is a big fancy word for fish eggs. Okay. So EQ or equalization is really just in sound reinforcement and production terms is tone control.
Yeah.
It's the ability to manipulate varied or various frequencies to achieve within the highs, mids, and lows create new tones, account for correct equalization issues, to give the production better sound quality. Essentially what you're going to see in EQ is that there are some systems that have a more sophisticated EQ system or ability to change multiple EQ frequencies over others, but it's really an ability to fine-tune how your sound sounds.
Okay. So then if we can cut to the overhead camera here, what you might see on a typical very like basic mixer is you have these EQ levels.
Yeah.
And this says high and this says low.
Absolutely.
Can you, I'll switch to the next slide, but can you kind of go over what each one of those does?
Yeah, so most mixers will have some sort of EQ adjustment or control. A lot of times they're very minimal if they're a smaller board. If they're a bigger board or console, they're going to have a lot more adjustability, especially with digital consoles, and we'll explain that in a little bit. Here on this little 2 amp, is this 3? A little 4 input channel mixer, you're going to see it has, again, the high and the low. The highs adjust all the highs or trebles.
Okay.
Lows adjust all the basses, the subtones. And then, of course, if there was a mid in the middle, that would control all of the mid-range tones, which are typically something like muddy tones, presence tones, things that are going to make you sound like you're in a tunnel or you're sitting underneath a cardboard box trying to talk through it. Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to get those adjustments. If you cut to the overhead again here for me, Wade, you'll see it's a little bit different on my board because on my EQ board, I have a graphic representation of those tones. So I can see where they are, and again, lows are here, mids are here, and highs are there.
Okay. Can we, I know you said we could play a track.
Yeah,
and actually
absolutely.
let people in the audience like listen to what these different EQs adjust. Because like the best way I learn is just by going extreme this way and then turning it extreme this way to hear the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great.
Give me a second here. We'll put my ears in and we'll play an audio track for you guys so everybody can hear it.
And I'm just going to do this. And then
Oh, help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're our only hope. Is that how that is?
yeah, right.
All right, cool. Hey, nothing against over-the earphones, man. They're awesome for isolation. So, all right. So this is a track we found online, and we really liked it because it gives a nice overview of all the different highs, mids, and lows that you can come into. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to play the track here, and that way you can hear it.
And then we'll adjust our overhead camera, and then Gary can go ahead and make those adjustments here. There we go. And there we go.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So as you see, I have a digital console, obviously. I have what's known as RTA turned on. That's just real-time analysis. So I can see where the highs, mids, and lows are traveling inside of the board and then coming into the graphics EQ. Currently, I have the EQs turned off. So what you're hearing is a mix right now directly from the way it was produced.
So this is non-altered?
Non-altered,
okay.
right. So what I'll do is I'll explain what these are, adjust them, let you listen, and then drastically change it. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's
good. So we'll turn on our EQ, and we're going to start with the lows, all right? And we're going to drop them. We're going to cut them out entirely. So here we go.
Okay, now the drums and the bass is just gone.
Yeah. So all the sub, the low ends, the kick of the drum. Obviously, you can still hear it, but it's not as pronounced.
Yeah.
And then if we change that, and you take a listen here. Now you're
Now it's heavy.
it's heavy.
If you had a
and you're-
subwoofer, it would be going nuts.
right, but you're also hearing some clipping now too,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yes.
So EQ can adjust how the gain's affected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good to
So we'll
know.
bring that back down. Let's go to our mids here. We'll do the exact same thing. Take a listen with me.
I see. Okay. Okay. And
All right.
now this is why you say they're muddy tones? Is that right?
Yeah, this is where the muddy tones come into play, where
Okay.
it just sounds really low. It's in a box.
Yeah.
So we'll turn these back up. Take a listen for that.
And now it's tinny.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. That's really helpful. Like when you hear it, when you actually hear the music being adjusted, then it's like, then it becomes very, very sensitive.
Yeah, the thing is that, and we'll show you here in the next graphic once we do our demonstration here, but this one in particular adjusts room presence. So when I adjust it slowly, take a listen here to low.
Oh yeah, now it's like you're outside of the area, like you're outside of the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And then here it is.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, real tinny,
Yeah.
real tunnely. And the reason that's important is because that'll adjust how you sound when it comes to being either in a tunnel or being in a box or
Got
outside
it.
of the room. Muddy tones are usually in the presence range, so you're going to hear it's going to be a way
Got it.
different tone. And then of course our highs, that's an important thing here too. So we'll drop them.
Yeah. Okay.
So the ting of the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. Those high frequencies are gone. And then how might you mix this? Like obviously it's coming in a certain way. How might you mix this on your own to make it sound a little different?
Yeah,
Like,
and I
properly?
know we get in that a little bit later in
Yeah.
the webinar, but I usually start with the lows and move up.
I see.
But yeah, so if you take a listen here, guys on the live stream there, you'll hear that I'm adjusting the EQ tones, the high ones up, and you'll hear the change. So let's set it to the way that I would like it to sound, and then I'll give you an exact example.
Yeah, I
of
guess
how
that's
it
what
goes.
I meant. Is
Yeah,
how you
you're
get
good.
it to how you want
You're
it
good,
to
buddy.
sound.
So I start with the lows, and this is just a rough, and then once I hear it, I go back and change it. There you go. So
Oh, it sounds more full now.
yeah, it definitely has
Got
a
like a
fuller
fuller
presence.
sound. Okay.
Take a listen for a second. We'll let it go. And then I'll turn it off. Here's the difference. Put it back in.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely elevates it.
Pushes it up, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I like that.
absolutely. So that's
Cool.
how EQ can change
Yeah.
your sound, and it can literally change how the tone is affected. What sounds different? And like I said in there, EQ can correct issues.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have somebody who's like really bassy and is like rattling the cages, adjust their lows, and they won't sound like that anymore.
So it's not just for music. You can
Not
do
just
it
for music,
voice.
for vocals. You can do it for even for video too. So
Oh.
you can definitely change
If you're,
tones
if
for
you're
that.
recording an interview and somebody comes in really high pitched, you might be able to
Change that
calm it
volume.
down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, that's super helpful. And I know there's one more thing we want to show, like a little bit more of a breakdown of these frequencies. Maybe you can explain this graphic for us.
Yeah, I wanted to throw this in here because this shows you kind of where everything's located in the range. So if we start again from left to right, I mean, that's how we read, so that's technically how we should do audio as well. You're going to see deep bass. So imagine somebody who's got, a Corvette or something, and they got big old subs in the back, right?
That was me when I was a teenager. That was definitely me.
That's where the deep bass is
Unfortunately.
located, is right there. The deep bass is located right in that deep range, so that's where your subs are. And of course, low bass is where it's in as well. So as you can see by the graph, the frequencies at the bottom, and I don't want you to be too concerned as basic audio reinforcement comes.
Okay.
Don't be too concerned with frequencies, and unless you want to know more about how they're affecting your sound. But for this example, worry about where your level is in comparison to what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And that's where a digital console comes in real handy. It shows you. And then you have your mid ranges. And again, like I said, that second area with the EQ, that's where presence is located. And that's, of course, that's at the higher end of the mid range. So it's at the low end of lows. I'm sorry, low end of highs, high end of mid, right? That's a tongue twister.
So that's like when you're like, if you were having a conversation with somebody like we are, like I'm hearing like the presence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to adjust that a little bit because what that'll do,
range.
exactly, what it'll do is it'll clean up your audio and it'll make it sound like somebody's actually standing in front of the camera and in front of the mic.
So for like a live streaming application, if a pastor is talking to an audience, you want him to sound like he's
right there talking to you in front of you. Right. Exactly.
Makes sense.
And then of course you have your treble, which is of course the high and very high ends, and those are going to be extremely effective when it comes to having something extremely trebled, something that has a lot of high end to it, and it sounds real, not necessarily tinny, but it just sounds real shiny. It's like right up there. It's really high end, and you don't really like it. It's almost squeechy, screeching sound. So that's where this is. That's why I wanted to show you this graphic here. It makes a little bit of sense to see how it rolls in.
Okay, makes sense. So we've given you like the basics of a mixer, gain and EQ, plus the inputs and outputs. But I know a very common question that we get is like, should I get an analog or digital mixer? And it's something I even like consider. So I think we're gonna go through the disadvantages and advantages of both digital and analog. And just for me, like I know there's not one right way to do it. Like,
no, absolutely, there's not.
I think it depends on your use case, right? Like you can't really say one is better than the other. It just depends on what works best for you. So we can just go over both of them. Yeah,
so a lot of times people will ask that question to both Josh, me, to our tech team. What is the best console, or what would you suggest is the best piece of equipment you use? And I always tell people when they ask me questions about recommendations is that it's personal preference.
Right.
What I suggest to you is not necessarily what's right for you.
Yeah.
But there again, I have my own personal needs and my own personal preference. So when it comes to analog mixers, as you can see here with our slide, they're generally less expensive than larger consoles. They generally have to run a large snake or some sort of mini connections to get to the back one-to-one. So that can be kind of an advantage because you're connecting those items, and they're physical hardwired connections, right? But then again, flip that, it's a huge snake. You have to run a long distance.
Okay, yeah.
That's a lot to run.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a snake and you're running large sets of XLRs or quarter-inch cables, that's a lot of cables.
Right, right.
A snake comes in handy because it makes it a little bit easier. And then, of course, you can have various assortments of different accessories, or rack systems is what they're called, to customize effects, compression, gate stuckers, so forth and so on. And then likewise, there's no way to have it all built in with an analog console. Some analog consoles do have some effects built in, but they're not very intuitive.
Okay.
It's very, very low end, not a lot of control with it. The one thing I would say a disadvantage that really gets me because I'm a techie is the fact that analog consoles do not have remote control availability.
So you have to be right in front of it.
You got to be right in front of it.
To control it.
Yeah, okay. And if your audio is like mine at a church, our audio points to the floor sometimes, so I don't get to hear the true sound. But if you flip the script and we go to digital consoles, by the way, again, like I said, this is all personal preference, but digital consoles, the advantages are you can run a single Ethernet cable for a digital snake. You don't have to run a big bulky snake. It does have built-in effects and systems. Again, it has the one-in-one direct connections with expansion cards, so forth and so on. You have that graphic visual aid, and then of course, again, my favorite thing is the iPad control or tablet control.
From anywhere.
From anywhere. Right. So as long as you're hooked up to the Wi-Fi or to a hardwired connection, you can move around your sanctuary or around your venue and control it. But and then you go to the disadvantages with a digital console. Generally, they are more expensive.
Okay.
And they can be. It's a bigger investment. Bulky, and they're heavy, and they're big. So not only do they have some heft to them, but they take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And that can be a downside with any type of digital console. And then I would say the last thing is that they're very complex. They can be advanced. And so buying a digital console,
they have like a lot coming in and
they have a lot coming in, going out. They have a lot of features built in. So they can be complex for the average user or even for the volunteer.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm just like, for a lot of the work I do, just specializing in video, I usually only have like 1 or 2 inputs. So like a simple 2-channel to maybe 4-channel mixer like this is fine for me because I just need to adjust a couple of different things. I'm not doing anything too crazy with effects, you know. I might just be getting like a microphone and music, or like what we have here today where if you work in video, like it's just the 2 of us talking.
Yeah.
So we're using 2 lav mics. So we don't need like a huge heavy digital mixer for that kind of
No,
thing.
you wouldn't need it. And that's why it's personal preference and need. So at the beginning of this whole webinar, we said the 2 equational things, right, is your equipment
and
your connection type.
Yep.
So if you're a band on the go and you go from venue to venue, maybe a digital rack system like Behringer makes would be perfect for you. Or maybe you're a venue that has a lot of people come through and you see a lot of people with different needs. An analog may be better because it's going to be a lot faster to change.
Okay.
And
That
of
makes
course,
sense.
a lot of analog consoles are really portable. So
That's true.
you know, there's all of that availability that's available to you there too.
So then, you know, maybe on the video specialist end, you might be good with just an analog mixer. But if you're going into like a big house of worship, large church environment, maybe, you know, upgrading to a digital mixer might be
a good option because you're going to get the ability to have the full range of effects, compressions, gate stuckers, all the things that come in with the advanced knowledge of those consoles.
Got it. That makes sense. That's actually super helpful. And a question we get a lot is just like, what's the best mixer for us to get, and especially if you're in a church environment. So maybe we can talk about the Behringer X32 a little bit and explain why we like that so much.
So, I mean, as you can see
we're not
here,
sponsored by Behringer.
No, but you know, if Behringer's watching, I'm looking for sponsors. You know, Holy Mess is looking for some sponsors. But I can tell you that the X32 has a wide range of features. It is a little bit easier to use. There's a little bit more, a lot of tutorials online, especially through YouTube, and a lot of availability to see how it works and how to use it. I think the one thing that I like most about the Behringer line of mixers is that they go from super advanced stationary mixers all the way down to extremely portable. And so if you check out kit.com/BoxCast, we do have a varying range of analog and digital consoles mixed into that. But Behringer makes it for everybody. So the mixer I have is called the X18. It's X-Air X18. It's only controlled via an iPad or a digital tablet of some sort, whether it be analog or not. Android or not. But then the thing about this is that this is a really good portable system for me and for my podcast because we're never in one place at one time. We don't have a studio, so this is great. If you're a band who's like traveling and you're doing live streaming, but you're also like you need a good system to run, Behringer makes a really cool rack unit that they just slides into a rack.
How nice is it just to put something in a rack,
put it right in and
run with it,
run and gun, right? So
that's very useful.
Again, personal preference is key. But again, the reason I like Behringer, and I suggest this to a lot of people, is because of the fact that Behringer makes it at a great price range, makes it affordable to buy, and makes it easier to use.
So the X32 line is kind of like the industry standard of digital mixer.
Yeah, I think Behringer stole the market when they bought Midas and took it over. But
Got it. Well, cool. That's very helpful because a lot of times people just want to know what should I get, and so there's something at least you can research and look more into. The next couple things we're going to talk about, I know you have a philosophy of creating the right mix, and there's obviously, you know, like 1,000 ways to skin a cat, like you say. So
you took my line, Josh.
I did. I'm sorry.
You took my line.
I'm sorry, but can you kind of explain our philosophy? I know this is very subjective, but like the way you like to go about creating your mix.
So I'll make it super quick for you. I read left to right. I mix left to right. So I also do that with my EQs. So anything that I do will start with lows. So it's going to be usually like kick drums, snares, toms. Snares are a little bit more mid and high, but I usually start with drums. So I want to build a nice, firm foundation, and I want to start with my drum kit. And then I build that up, make it sound good, clean, everything's mixed well, some things are a little bit over the others. And then I start moving into other bassy units, like the bass drum, bass guitar, or maybe you have a bassy percussion instrument that you've got mic'd. And then I move into my mid-range. So you're looking at like higher end mid-range, like guitars, like acoustics, acoustic guitars. Lower range, mid-ranges would be like your keyboards or your pianos. And then I move into my highs, which would be electric guitars, vocals, which I always mix last. And the reason for that, you're going to ask, right? You're like, well, what's the reason? Is it because like
vocals are all over the place?
Well, no, it's because vocals, if you don't hear somebody singing, you don't know what they're saying.
Right.
So if you mix the vocals below the drums, you're obviously it doesn't sound good, right?
Yeah.
So I want my vocals to be prominent, so I always mix them last because then I can bring them up to the right level,
Makes sense.
make them in. And again, I always mix my vocals in the same order, lower end vocals to my higher end vocals. So I'm always mixing the lower voices, like my bassy voices, up to my higher end voices. So I
Okay.
could create a mix that is balanced, reinforced, and clear.
Okay, that makes sense. So you set your foundation with the lows and the
Yep.
mids, and then you can make adjustments in the vocals.
Absolutely.
After that. That's very helpful. Thank you for explaining that to
Yeah,
us.
no problem.
And then the other thing, just because we get this question all the time, and I think it's very clarifying to help explain the best way, is like, how do we get audio into the BoxCaster or the BoxCaster Pro? So we're just
Yeah.
going to do a very simple demo here and show you with Gary's mixer probably the best way here. So if we go to the overhead cam, we'll just show you. And then I've got a BoxCaster here.
So the first way that we would do this, and this is probably, I would say the preferred method, is doing an output of some sort.
Okay.
So on my mixer here, this is, and obviously it's labeled out, but this would be an RCA out.
Okay.
And I have full control over its volume, and please
Go
do
into
white
there.
to white, red to red.
Okay, yeah, don't mix them
all
up.
right? Don't mix them up. Please do white to white, red to red. And we're going to take this out, and we're going to connect it to the red and white here on our BoxCaster.
Okay. And why do you think that can sometimes be a better method than going into the HDMI input on the BoxCaster?
Sure. So the HDMI input on the BoxCaster is embedding the audio, which is another method you could do, but you get better control over gain and volume and tonality because you have a completely separate mix from the output.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Whereas if you go into a camera, then you know, it could be variable, and then you have to deal with adjusting the gain on
Right.
the camera, and you're almost creating more work for yourself
Exactly.
in that sense.
I think the only way that this would differ, this whole setup would differ, is that if you were going to embed over HDMI, right, and you weren't going to take it into the BoxCaster directly, would be taken to like a video switcher,
Okay.
and the video switcher would then embed it over HDMI. So you'd still have fine-tuned control,
Right.
but the video switcher is going to take it and put it over HDMI, so it's a single cable at that point.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then by then the audio's already mixed anyway.
Audio's already mixed at that
Now,
point.
one thing I've run into with video switchers is sometimes when you take when you take an audio feed, the switcher will control the level and
Changes it,
it'll
yeah.
change it. Then you have to readjust again, which can be frustrating.
And that's part of gain structure,
Yeah.
making sure that you have
Yeah.
enough input to
Yeah.
give out enough output.
So most often, try to go into the RCA on the BoxCaster, and then obviously from the BoxCast dashboard, you can mute the HDMI audio and select analog only, and then the BoxCaster is only streaming the feed from this
Yeah.
port right here.
That's an important step too.
Yeah, because you have to, because otherwise you could get people talking by the camera. Or
Right,
anything
and the
like that.
camera's picking up the audio and
Yeah.
putting it in the HDMI. Right.
And then of course, we have the BoxCaster Pro, which has a variety of inputs on it, but it does have these XLR and quarter-inch combo jacks. So maybe you can, because this confused me for a while, the difference between the channels and the left and right. Maybe you can explain these inputs.
Yeah,
here.
just a little bit, without going into too great a depth of what they are. But so you have audio ins for both, and they're labeled channel 1 and channel 2. The reason for that is because generally channel 1 is a left, which means mono,
Okay.
and then channel 2 is right, which is also mono. But when you have channel 1 and you want to go stereo, you can't do stereo over channel 1 because it's an independent input.
Oh, I
So
see.
you have to do stereo.
You have to go
so
into
you have
both
to
of
bring
them.
2 channels.
Whether it's quarter-inch or XLR,
Whether it's
right?
quarter-inch or
Okay.
XLR, correct.
Okay. That's good to know. That's very clear.
Yeah, and so I mean, even just inputs on those are really simple. We make it really easy with our BoxCaster Pro because it has the combo jack, much like the combo jack here on my digital console. Combo jacks are the way to go, man.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, they make it really easy for connections.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to have a bunch of converters or a bunch of
right.
adapters.
Right, exactly. So I'll go ahead and reiterate. If you want to know more about the equipment that we like to use, we actually have created a kit today called Our Favorite Audio Mixers. So you can go ahead to our kit.com site, check it out, see, it's for all expertise levels, so there's a variety of budgets on there, and there's both analog and digital mixers.
Right.
Check it out. It's actually Gary's thoughts on each mixer, so
A little
so
descriptors.
It's authentic.
Yeah, oh,
and,
yeah.
And then also, if you want to learn more about purchasing equipment, I know you've got a guy that you like to
Yeah,
work with.
I got a guy. His name's Nick Lamondola, and he's a sales engineer with Sweetwater. If you haven't purchased anything from Sweetwater, these guys are professionals. They take care of you 100%. They tell you the ins and outs. They'll help you set it up and make sure that you know what you're doing. And his information's here, obviously. When you contact him, if you want to know more or you're going to purchase some equipment that we suggest, please just reference BoxCast. There's nothing that we're getting on the side of this. It's just we're helping Nick out by sending some people his way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So he's a good dude.
He's a great dude. Yeah, he's helped out quite a bit.
Good. Okay, so we'll move on now to our live Q&A. We'll go ahead and take your questions that you've asked in the chat, and I'll go ahead and pull up our live chat here. And then I'll also go back to our contact slide. So if we don't get a chance to ping you or talk to you live today, you can go ahead and send us an email. We'll be happy to work with you more in depth about your setup.
Absolutely.
For video stuff, reach me. For audio stuff, definitely go to Gary. He's the guy.
Yep.
All right, so first question that we have here, Gary, is it worth buying a separate audio mixer for your stream or just using an aux channel if you had to decide?
Yeah, great question. So if I had to decide, if I have, without going into like crazy depth about this, I would say using the output on your mixer is the best, unless you're sending it to like a control room or you have the mix, you're just sending a standard mix out and you want to control more gain or more volume control, then definitely use a side mixer. I'm traditionalist. I write from the console directly out as an output.
Okay.
It's perfectly fine for me. Anytime I've live streamed, it's been that way. And that way I still have control over what's being put into that output. So with that fine-tuned adjustments, I can make at that point in time.
Because the only thing you ever really need to adjust going to the live stream is gain anyway, right?
Gain and volume, yeah, absolutely. But then, you know, if you're doing an output, you still have the ability to control the tonality.
Okay.
So if something doesn't sound quite right, it sounds good in your mains, but it doesn't sound quite right, usually you have a whole completely different EQ structure for the output.
Okay, cool, thank you. Next question. This one I'm actually very curious about too. Is there a difference between compression and clipping?
Oh yeah, way different. So clipping again is, and you can throw that slide up if you want to. Clipping is hitting the ceiling of what your system is able to do, the amount, the structure of it, how high it can get, right? And especially with our 6-foot man analogy. But compression, what compression does, and that's interesting, without going in, again, too much advanced information, compression actually will help bring that down.
Okay.
So if you have too much gain or you need to push more gain in, adding compression will actually bring that control back into a reasonable realm where you're able to have it as a high gain input and still have a very good volume control.
So do some devices come with built-in compression?
Yeah,
and they'll do it for you?
the digital consoles usually come in with a compression, a gator ducker system, and then you can compress that signal down. So that way, it still you can pull it up a high gain and have enough throughout the entire console and control. Yeah.
Okay, that's
great question, by the way.
Great question. I've got another interesting one for you.
Okay.
Can you explain the difference between the following: 1/4-inch mono, 1/4-inch stereo, and 1/4-inch TRS?
Okay. Okay.
Maybe we can pull up.
Yeah,
the
let's
cable
pull it
here.
up here. Okay, so this is 1/4-inch mono. Again, the tip of the cable, and I'll get close here for the side view, but the tip of the cable is single line. So 1/4-inch mono is only going to run one single channel of audio. So usually it's left. 1/4-inch stereo will have 2 lines, and that's going to run both. It's going to run 1/4-inch out through stereo, left and right, and it's going to combine it in one single cable. The benefit of doing that is that you have to have a stereo system, a stereo connection, like from your console to run that, or you're only going to get left over the one channel. And then running, I'm sorry, what was the other one? Mono or TRS?
1/4-inch TRS.
1/4-inch TRS. Those are interesting because they also have the three tips, so the 3 black tips, left, right, and then input, which is interesting because it carries the ability to run a microphone.
Oh,
so
I see.
if you've ever looked at like your Apple earbuds, those are not 1/4-inch, 1/8-inch. Sorry, I lost my mind there for a second. They're 1/8-inch TRRS.
TRRS.
Now, just TRS is just literally it's a 1/4-inch cable. So
and that's why you need an adapter to go into the iPhone.
You got it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because most iPhones are now lightning cable, right?
Yes, right.
Good. Another great question. Thank you for that.
Our next question is, can you split the audio signal using both RCA to the live stream as well as HDMI to a local recording?
Absolutely. Yes, you can. The question is, and that would require more information from the questionnaire.
Yeah.
But if you're going to split your live video out to a local recording and then split your audio out, literally it's just some powered splitters, HDMI splitter to split your video, and then a RCA splitter. Normally you don't need a powered splitter for RCA.
Yeah.
But you can do it if you need to. And then splitting those to a local recorder.
Yeah.
What I've done in the past with live streaming is I've actually split those two to a completely different room in our building and ran that as, run RCA to a pair of speakers and run the HDMI to a television.
And then the recommendation I would make there is probably make sure the encoder is at the end of the chain before you split everything, so that your live stream is getting the signal last.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
So another question is, this is an interesting one. Do we need a second BoxCaster to provide streaming to those in the audience with difficulty hearing, people watching online? We cannot afford the delay present in video streaming to the remote audience.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, do you need a second BoxCaster to increase the amount of volume?
Yeah, so if you had one volume level, you need multiple levels in the live stream, basically.
Okay. Yes and no, maybe I would say is the answer to that.
Yeah.
If you're going to run a second BoxCaster to run live video and audio, I mean, you essentially could do it that way, but I mean, there are some better ways of doing it. And not to sound like crazy or anything, but you could turn the volume up on the speakers.
Right.
But what I would say is probably the easier method would be to change out the audio that you're using in the room that you're sending it to.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So if you're running it to a television and the TV can only go up so high, or if you're watching the stream over like a phone, some laptops just don't have the right type of speakers. They're not loud enough. They're not a good quality.
Okay.
Right? So maybe there needs to be a change. And you know what? That question in particular, whoever sent that question in, email us directly at questions@boxcast.com.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Which is our tech support side, or through me directly. And we can kind of figure out what your needs are and try to help you understand where you can go better with that. I think that would be a better option than just going in a direct answer here. So.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Next question. This is a good one. Coming out of my audio mixer, there is a lag on the video. There's a lag on the audio to video. Can I correct that? My video comes out of a video mixer, Roland V1 HD.
Oh, okay, yes. So
how do you deal with audio delay?
So audio delay is a monster. It can happen. Usually you'll have to pick up a delay sequencer, like it's an actual device, a box that you'll run your audio into, and then you can change the millisecond delay. Some video switchers have the ability to do that automatically, where you can select it. But there is the need sometimes that your video is just way faster than your audio, and so you're getting that lip sync thing where it's completely off. And I'm sure that's what this person's asking. Yeah. So yeah, you may want to look into you said a Roland, right?
Yeah, V1 HD.
I believe the Roland VH1 VHD has.
I think it has delay.
I think it has a delay setting in there where you can change the audio delay. I can get a confirmation from that. Again, email us at questions@boxcast.com or directly to me, Gary.Buchanan@boxcast.com. We can get you the answer fairly quickly. But yes, that is possible. You can change the amount of delay being sent to the BoxCaster from your console. Some digital consoles have it built in too.
Okay, and then there are specific devices you can buy too that
handle
help with the delay.
That handle that specifically. Okay. Absolutely.
That's very helpful. The next question, this is a very good one and something I'm curious about. Can you explain like incorporating ambient and crowd noise in the room that you're streaming in? Maybe if it's sports, it's like the crowd.
Yeah, you want to hear the crowd.
Game, or it's like for a concert, maybe it's people screaming. So
sure.
Can you explain good ways to go about that?
So really, in short, easy terms, that is going to be an input like a microphone coming into your board, and you're going to mix that into your main mix for the live stream. With digital consoles, you can do it with analog too. It's a little bit easier to see on a digital console. You can actually mix what channels, what particular inputs are going into your output. Okay. So you can add an ambient. So a lot of times you'll use a condenser mic. I usually use like an Audio Technica or Samson condenser mics. Those are usually my favorite.
Okay.
And you put it on a boom stand, stick it out in the middle, of your room.
Where in an auditorium might you put
so you want crowd noise, for example, usually overhead, at a good distance in between. So in the middle of your area, like if you're in a house of worship, like a sanctuary, usually you'll see a lot of people put 2 up, and they're in the middle, so they can gather everything in the room. Especially for in-ear monitors, it's a little solitary in those. But then that literally it's just running that to your board as an input, and then mixing it into your output, so you can hear that. But always remember, with having ambient noise, every cough, every sneeze, every baby cry can be heard. So if your pastor's preaching or somebody's talking and you hear somebody, ripping paper in the background, you're going to hear it. So you want to make sure that you bring that audio level in at the right amount.
And remember to leave the microphone. This is just personal experience, but remember to leave the microphone far away enough that you can't hear people's conversations or what they're talking about.
Absolutely, no spying here.
Yeah, no spying, and obviously, you just don't want to pick that up. You want it to just sound distant, right? Like you don't want it to be.
You want it to sound like you're in the room.
Right. Exactly. But not standing next to somebody.
Not standing next to somebody who's talking about their Aunt Mildred.
Exactly. Bless Aunt Mildred. Okay, so we have a lot of different questions. And, okay, here's a good one. I'm feeding an aux output from my GB analog switcher to a DVD recorder, where I always get good quality sound. When I take the same output into my BoxCaster, I get clipping and distortion. And I know this is something we've run into for a reason, for a variety of reasons. And can you explain why, when you go into our encoders, what might be causing some clipping?
So the encoder itself is it's strictly just an ingestion device.
It doesn't change levels or anything.
It doesn't change levels. It doesn't have any physical buttons on it. There's no way to go into a software and change how it creates gain. So when you get the audio coming in at 1 volt, because that's the highest it'll go.
1 volt?
1 volt is that if you're getting that audio clipping and distortion, there may be something with your GB40 that's causing that audio change. That's increasing the gain to max it out. Or maybe there's just not enough coming from your board and you're overcompensating on the switcher as well. That's a big thing with video switchers, is that they ingest audio and they're supposed to put audio out, but they have their own gain structure. Again, this is a question that we can walk through over the phone or through email.
Sometimes it requires more in-depth troubleshooting.
It does, a lot of in-depth, but that's a good question, especially with certain types of video switchers. It's a lot harder to control the gain. And again, that's why I always suggest coming directly from your console. If you're going into like a recording system, split the signal. Split the audio into the recorder, and then that way your BoxCaster is going to get a separate mix.
And it's getting the mix that is truly from the mixer.
From the mixer, right.
Got it. Okay, that's great. Let's talk about the difference. This is a very good question, too. Talk about the difference in setting EQ for the spoken word versus music.
Okay, yeah, so music, we'll start there. Music has a lot of different EQ tonalities that are going to come into play, right? Your pastor has one voice. Right? So when you're mixing music, you generally want an overly good tone of warms and highs that don't break the bank. And what I say by that is that somebody doesn't sound screechy. Somebody doesn't sound like they're sticking their face in water and trying to talk. They don't sound like in a box. They don't sound like they're in the next room. And so the tonality between live music and your pastor is because you have more coming in with a band than you do with your pastor. I like to do with my pastor is I set up through my digital console, I set up 2 scenes. I set up one where he's talking first thing he gets in, he's getting himself ready, we do a quick sound check, and then I set the second one. And that second one is the important one because his voice is warmed up for the day, he's ready to talk, and a lot of times, especially males, our mid-ranges are just out of whack. And usually they change. And that's the culprit. It's not necessarily the lows or the highs. It's usually the mid-range that changes.
I know when I wake up in the morning, I sound completely different
right?
Right now.
Me too. And sometimes I just don't talk.
But most of the time.
So with live band implementation of EQing, again, I start at the lows with the lows. So drums, bass, percussion, hit my mids, keyboards, acoustics, anything that's going to be in the mid-range tone, and then I hit my highs. So that would be my higher end keyboards, electric guitars, and of course my vocals. And I EQ those in the exact same fashion. Now, digital consoles are great, and I know I'm kind of going over a little bit on this, but
No, you're good.
digital consoles are great for that because once you set it, you can save it and then go back to it. So if anything changes, like you have a child who comes in and says, "Ooh, pretty," and start changing things, you can go right back to the original setting just with the touch of a button.
Yeah. Or a grown adult like me that likes to come in.
Or
and
Josh
mess around.
Clements, he walks in and is like, "Hey, that's nice." You know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That was actually really helpful. I have another really good question.
These are all really good questions.
Yeah, these are great. These are really great. Somebody's asking, I'm looking for recommendations on a small audio mixer. I have 2 XLR inputs and the output going to my BoxCast encoder. I could answer that. I would say go to the kit site that we have in the description. There's a Yamaha mixer there. It's about $100. It's got 2 XLR inputs on it, and it's got an RCA output on it, and that's exactly what you're looking for. Just to get like to those 2 basic inputs and 1 output to the BoxCast.
And I think there's also a Behringer Xenix in there as well.
Yeah,
that does the same thing. And it's a really nice mixer for low end. This here that we have in front of us is a Mackie 402 VL23. I know that's like Japanese to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's literally exactly what you would need. It's got 2 XLR inputs, RCA outs, headphone jack out, and controls for all of that.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, for sure. And then Wade, maybe you can pull up. This is the one we have in the kit description. Thanks so much. This is, you can see here, we've got an XLR in here, an XLR in here. And then we've got 2, actually, I forgot it has 2 XLR outputs on it as well.
Oh yeah, you can run stereo, cool.
Yeah, so you'd be able to go like that too. Maybe that one isn't the right one for you though, because it doesn't have RCA, I actually just realized.
No, but you can run 1/4 inch out RCA very easily.
Yeah,
and
you could run 1/4 inch out.
And you would get what you would need from that point.
Yeah, but that's one we use here in the office. And I mean, basically what you're looking for, you can look for it in the tech specs, but there's tons of mixers like less than $100 that will get you
Oh yeah, and
that
Sweetwater, if you talk to Nick Lemondola at Sweetwater, tell him your needs. He will give you all the mixers out there that you could ever want.
Yeah, exactly. We've got another good question here, which I guess we could visualize. Somebody wants to know where to go to mute the HDMI audio so it doesn't interfere with the RCA audio.
Perfect question.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
I love them product questions, buddy.
I will actually go into our BoxCast dashboard here. 1 second. And we can pull this up.
This is us live.
This is, whoa, look at that. We'll go ahead and schedule a broadcast. And we'll just say like it's a test. So this is a simulation of what you would do. You go through, you fill out all the information. Let's just say like, use this one?
Yeah, just use that. I mean, it's not gonna make any difference. So.
Use that one. You go into advanced settings, and then you can go ahead and you can say audio sources. So you fill out all the information, you go to advanced settings, and then you can just click analog only.
Right.
And that will give you RCA audio only.
That, I will also note, is also changing it for the broadcast itself. If you want to change it for the Boxcaster level or at least for the Pro level, you'd do almost the same thing. You'd click on settings, and then you would drop over to the actual source. So it would be like your Boxcaster, hit advanced settings or edit settings, and then change that audio source for HDMI or analog only.
Oh, okay, I see. And then in some cases, if you want, you could do both of them, and maybe you have some ambient audio coming from a camera that you're actually okay with using, and then you have like announcer audio or speaker audio.
Yeah,
so you could do that.
You could try that, yeah.
As long as you're comfortable with where your camera is.
Listen, everything is experimental, so go for it.
It's worth trying. It's worth trying. And the Boxcaster will mix them together then if you click all sources. All right, so I think that about wraps it up on the questions. Oh, okay, here, I got one more for you.
Okay.
This one's a good one. I'm coming out of a pre-Sonus digital mixer out of an aux channel, using a 1/4 inch TRS to dual RCA cable.
Okay.
Into the Boxcaster RCA inputs. But when we live stream, they only hear one channel.
That's because your cable coming out of your mixer is mono.
Oh, okay, so it's only going to go one way.
Yeah,
so if it's
mono.
splitting here, it's only going to go to the left.
Yeah, that's because your 1/4 inch TRS is not a stereo. Unless it has the 2 black bands and your mixer is able to output stereo from its output, which normally most digital consoles and regular analogs don't do stereo outputs. You would have to use 2 at that point. Two outputs.
Okay.
Right.
Two separate ones.
Yeah. So wait, if you can cut to the side angle here real quick for me, I'll show you. So when we run for my podcast, we run literally straight up. We run 1/4-inch outs. So I actually have a 1/4-inch stereo running into that, but this doesn't run stereo. I just bought these because they were way cheaper. Excuse me. So these are all mono connections. Mm-hmm. They're not stereo whatsoever. So when you connect into it, you're literally running just one channel. We have, and I'm showing you this so you understand, I have this device here which offers me the ability to do in-ear systems, so I can hear everything. This gives me the ability to convert it to stereo. So it actually has a combiner in there to combine it into a stereo channel. But there again, the reason your PreSonus board is only getting the left is because most likely you're only able to run left on the output.
Okay.
And you're going to want to run 2 outputs to get a full stereo, or use the, I think, depending on the PreSonus board, should have an RCA out.
Okay, that's good to know. And now I know how to pronounce the name of that brand.
PreSonus?
PreSonus, yeah. Okay, good to know. All right, well, Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to go through all this with us. This has been very helpful for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people that have been watching. Again, if you have any other questions, you can check out our contact information. Feel free to email us, and we'll be happy to help. And then on top of that, for any BoxCast support-related questions, email us at questions@boxcast.com. So thanks so much for tuning in today. We've been happy to spend some time with you guys.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
Been fun.
And if you need anything else, just feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, thanks and happy streaming.